Kenya's economy will grow 5.5% this year compared to an estimated 4.8% last year, thanks to better weather and less political risk after last year's presidential election. This is according to the World Bank Economic Report. We are now joined by Dennis Otieno, who is currently attending the launch of that report. Dennis, where are we so far with that?
All right, thank you very much once again, Warui there in studio. Clearly, as I was saying earlier on, yes, the World Bank has given this positive projection of the country's economy to grow to 5.5%. And one of the key things that they were saying, they were looking at the last 5 years. Most of these projects have been largely driven by the government, but now they feel it's about time that we do see a bit of private capital investment coming in for the country to achieve this particular projection. But I'll just have the World Bank senior economist Alan Dennis, who happens to be my namesake, just to expound more on this particular projection that report that they have released today. Alan, thank you so much for joining us. Alan is a senior economist at the World Bank, and he'll tell us more about this particular report. Of course, we are seeing a projection of 5.5%, and also the fact that the country, the government rather, is really looking at achieving, this growth by focusing on some key areas. What would you say has largely driven this?
Yes, our projection for 2018 is 5.5%, and that is underpinned by 3 main factors. 2 of them have to do with some of the, what I would call, headwinds from last year sort of dissipating. First, the drought, which is, we have good rains this year, and secondly, the improvement in business sentiment, which was related to political uncertainties last year. That has also eased, and so we see an improvement in business sentiment, which will translate obviously into sort of a pent-up investment, which did not happen last year, coming on stream this year. So those are 2 reasons. The third one is an external reason, which has to do with the global economy, of which obviously Kenya is a big part of, has hit a sweet spot. There's a broad-based recovery both in developing countries as well as advanced economies. Kenya will benefit from that, be it through remittances, be it through its own exports, and be it through even capital flows. So these are the 3 reasons, major reasons, that underpin our rebound story for Kenya in 2018, but not only in 2018, continuing through to 2020, where we have growth in a region of around 6.1%.
Okay, 2018 is still pretty much young, and do you foresee any threats that may come in the wake of all this?
Yes, there are obviously risks to any growth projection, and there are risks. For example, I mean, oil prices now are relatively stable, around $60 per barrel, or even less, and Kenya being an net oil importer, were it to occur that oil prices spiked quite significantly, this would obviously have negative repercussions for Kenya. We still see very weak credit growth in Kenya. I know there is some movement to unlock this, but to the extent that this persists into the medium term, it could undercut the strength of the recovery of the economy, particularly the recovery that should be coming from the private sector.
To what extent has that largely impacted on growth?
It's affected growth to the extent that money drives people's purchases, both from the consumer side but also from the small SMEs, and so to the extent that people are starved of access to credit, which survey after survey continues to show that is an important constraint for businesses, it's affecting growth. I mean, some studies indicate that it shaved off about 0.4 percentage points from GDP growth as of last year. So it is impacting. So the earlier we see a recovery, I mean a durable and sustainable recovery in private sector credit growth, the more stronger the rebound of Kenya's economy will be.
Okay. Government spending has largely been put into focus, and of course we've seen players from various sectors also, talking about the issue of government spending. and from you during today's as you released this report, you clearly indicated that the issue of fiscal consolidation, and also the government really looking hard into their spending will be key going forward. Maybe you can just touch on that.
Yes. I mean, the government itself has come out with its budget policy statement where it indicates the deficit coming down to somewhere around 7.2% for this fiscal year, and even down towards 3% in 2021. That's very commendable. And so what this report is indicating is that macroeconomic stability has been the foundation for growth, not only in Kenya but several countries, and has certainly underpinned the robust growth in Kenya over the past 5 to 6 years. So it is important that that macroeconomic stability is safeguarded. If we look at what has happened in other African countries, over particularly until recently, where there was a slowdown in their economies, part of the reason, a big part of that reason, was because of macroeconomic instability, and the fiscal has an important role to play. So given the government's own determination to rein in on the fiscal, we are definitely supportive of that, and we think that if that is pursued, it will continue to sustain or safeguard the macroeconomic stability that Kenya has largely experienced over the past couple of years. So it remains fundamental, and it is important, and we are supportive of the pathway as outlined in the budget policy statement.
Okay. You talk of the government reining in. Maybe which areas do you think they should be looking at in particular to ensure that they do cut down on spending?
Yeah. Well, there are two things when you want to fiscal consolidate. You look at your expenditures and you look at your revenues. We've done work in the area of revenues, and we can see areas specifically in the area of tax exemptions where we see that leakages from there amount to around 5%. So there's certainly a need to look at all the exemptions to see whether this is something that is consistent with current priorities. So that's one area. On expenditures, the budget policy statement shows a slowdown in the pace of development spending. It would be good also to see a stronger slowdown in the pace of recurrent spending, because capital investments are still important, particularly if you want to preserve the potential growth of the Kenyan economy. So it's important to look at both the recurrent but also to look at revenue measures that can help to achieve these targets.
How fast do you think we'll see a bit of ease in the economy going forward?
I think we're already beginning to see some rebound. That underpins our recovery story. We're already beginning to see rebound. I mean, the recent business sentiment indicators, also surveys from the Central Bank of Kenya, all show that perceptions or market perceptions are improving. So, of course, it starts from a certain place and it trickles down broadly across the economy. But the fact that we're beginning to see this gives us hope that it will pick up speed and momentum towards the mid to the end of the year. So I think it's already started occurring.
I understand we don't have magicians at the World Bank, but then again, looking at 2019, what would you project? Our
projection for 2019 is 5.9%. It's 5.9%. And that sort of also assumes that some of the weaknesses, even that the economy is facing now, particularly on slowdown in the credit growth, the measures that are being worked on to improve upon the flow of credit to private sector will take root in 2018 and will be fully on board by 2019, and that's why we have a pickup in growth in 2019.
Thank you so much, Allen Dennis, for your time.
Okay, thank
you. Of course, Boroi, there you have it. That has been Allen Dennis. He is a senior economist at the World Bank, and clearly giving quite some positive projections for the country in 2019. If all factors remain as they are, they are foreseeing the economy growing to 5.9%. But clearly, all this does depend on how the government looks at its spending.